All right, guys, we have some new polling that we can share with you this morning about where the Republican primary race stands and also where the potential general election matchups stand. Put this first piece up on the screen. This is a new NBC News poll that shows Donald Trump gaining pretty significantly from their last poll, which was done in April. So this was the last poll was done documents indictment. This one is done post documents indictment. It shows Trump surging 6 points to take 51%, so a bare outright majority there. And perhaps even more difficult for Ron DeSantis, he actually dropped in the polls more than Trump rose. So you've got Trump at 51, you now have DeSantis at 22%. That is a 9-point drop from April. And it really demonstrates, Saagar, something that we have been theorizing, which is the more candidates that get in this race, the more difficult it is for DeSantis. You had Mike Pence go up a point. You have Chris Christie actually grabbing 5% of the vote at this point, outpolling, at least in this particular poll, individuals like Nikki Haley and Tim Scott. But every one of those a point up for Vivek Ramaswamy, a point up for Nikki Haley, 5 points for Chris Christie. That's not coming out of Trump. That's coming directly out of Ron DeSantis, which is why he has fallen off 9 points and is now sitting at 22% in this NBC News poll. Now, all caveats, included here, important to remember. I would take all of this polling with a grain of salt. But I always think the direction of the polls is actually more instructive than the absolute numbers. And so the fact that this poll confirms what most, but not all, other polls have shown, that Trump within the Republican primary has, at least maintained and probably expanded his lead is, another sort of dire warning for DeSantis and the other hopefuls.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the issue mainly is that people try to focus on one poll, but then they don't go into the direction. The direction is a disaster. And the thing is that if it's one, okay, but every single one that we have gotten post-indictment shows a bump for Trump. Every single one that we have shown post-DeSantis announcement shows either a slight increase or an overall drop as he continues to campaign. And in fact, this was part of the issue with this overall launch, what you and I were saying, it's very rare that you're the center of the attention. You better make sure that it goes super well and that you dominate the airwaves. And the problem for DeSantis is he's not the former president. He's not the one getting indicted, and he's got nothing to do with what's going on in Russia. So he's basically a sideshow, as all other campaigners are. Now, though we should note, let's put this up there, please, on the screen, the general election matchup, that in this, it's not like things are going all that well for Trump. It still shows Joe Biden at 49% and Trump at 45%. But if you apply previous polling misses for Trump, that would basically have him virtually tied. The original Krystal and Saagar rule was add 4 or 4 to 5 for any poll that involved the name Donald Trump, specifically in a general election. And if you do, they basically would show the two of them in a virtual tie, especially whenever you consider the razor-thin margins in the Electoral College. So by many accounts, like Trump, he may be weaker. Maybe, although we haven't seen all of the evidence just yet, that at least enough for me to convince that he's done. I don't think you can ever really get to that point. And then for DeSantis, I mean, the poll after poll after poll after poll that we have with likely GOP primary voters doesn't seem to be good for him overall since his campaign started. And indictment for Trump has just been the greatest political boon he could ever ask for.
Yeah, and just to give people a sense of how much things have shifted away from DeSantis, back in January, February was kind of the peak of his polling. Before he even got in the race, his average, I'm looking at Real Clear Politics, DeSantis's average was about 30%, and Trump was down under 50%. And when you're keeping Trump under 50%, you got a case you can make there.
Yes.
You can say, if I consolidate all of these other people fall by the wayside, and I consolidate all of their 6 and 7 point percentages that they're garnering here, then I can overtake him. The problem is now DeSantis's average sits at about 21%. So that's a 9-point drop from where he was before he even got in the race. And, since he got in, he's been more or less flat. He's a little bit down from where he was when he first jumped in the race, but not much. It's more or less even. But the case that the DeSantis people were making, you guys might recall, is before he got in the race, they were like, well, sure, he's only at 30% now, but once we get in and we start making the case, we haven't even tried to start campaigning yet. So that obviously hasn't come to fruition, at least not yet. And in fact, the more people jump in the race, and we had a few more entrants last week. I think we had Will Hurd, a former congressman, jump into the race as well. Is he going to garner a lot of percentage points? No. But every one of these people, if they're even taking a single point, that's coming out of DeSantis's hide, not out of Trump. And so actually, the longer this goes on, the more the field fills out, the more people consolidate around Trump, the more these indictments sort of hard Republican GOP base support around him, and the more and more difficult this becomes. You know, on the general election piece, one of DeSantis's arguments is that he's more electable, and right now the polls bear that out. I mean, I don't know if that holds. There's no guarantees, et cetera. But he has a case he can make here. But it's not clear that the Republican base, A, really cares about that. It's not clear that they really believe it because they've seen the way that polls have been wildly off before. Trump was at this confab of religious conservatives that was here in D.C. He gave a speech to what everyone is describing as basically like a rapturous crowd. Now, remember, this is the religious right. This is the group that supposedly he should be having some issues with because he's moderated a bit on abortion vis-a-vis Ron DeSantis. Let's take a listen to how he handled that issue in particular at this conference.
As your president, I will continue to stand proudly for pro-life policies, just as I did for 4 strong years. That's why when I'm reelected, I will continue to fight against the demented late-term abortionists in the Democrat Party who believe in unlimited abortion on demand and even executing babies after birth.
So it sounds to me like he's given the crowd there, which again, a religious right crowd, sounds to me like he's given them everything that they want and they are completely on board. So a lot of the critique of his abortion position is unwillingness to back, for example, a national ban, something that Mike Pence has got on board with, or even calling, what was the word he used, Ron DeSantis' 6-week ban? I think he said it was brutal, something like that.
Correct.
They don't seem too
harsh,
that's it. They don't seem too concerned about that. He seems to have found a way to message, at least to the grassroots, maybe not the grass tops, that they are responding to.
Yeah, let's put this one up on the screen, too, just to evidence even more of what you're talking about, Krystal, which is that the faith in Trump dominated the religious conservative gathering. And specifically, it was Chris Christie who said he was trying to run for president to end Trump's political career, who was booed, actually, on the stage. Christie said, quote, "You can boo all you want." But that just shows you, ultimately, that the case of Pence, of DeSantis, well, Pence in particular, of I'm the real religious conservative. Guess what, dude? They like Trump more than they like you. And this is something where religious conservatives, I think rightfully, can say, at the end of the day, he is the one who got Roe versus Wade done. And yeah, Pence, you're the one who wants to go further, all of that, but you don't have the same proven track record. So, that case that a lot of these people were making against him, I just don't see it right now.
Yeah, I mean, Christie is, at least in this poll, is actually nipping at Pence's heels, which is interesting. I mean, listen, I think it speaks to the fact that, is Christie going to get much higher than like the 5% he's at right now? Maybe. I think he's probably got a max of like 10%. But it does show you that there is something to just being totally unabashed. I mean, Christie has been, I've always thought, just on sheer political talent, I think Chris Christie is a very talented political actor and always has been. And so the fact that he's willing to go in front of what is clearly a hostile crowd and just say what he thinks and put it out there like that, there is some small percentage of the GOP base that is responding to that show of strength right now. And maybe ultimately it's enough to weaken Trump, but it's hard for me to see that given where things stand today. But again, whether it's Chris Christie, whether it's Mike Pence, whether it's Vivek Ramaswamy, whether it's Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Will Hurd, Asa Hutchinson, what's the North Dakota governor? Doug Burgum?
Burgum, yes.
Any of these people, they're getting any of the vote. It's a problem for Ron DeSantis. And by the way, I just saw a piece this morning, Saagar, about how his early state strategy, which depends on Iowa and New Hampshire, still looking okay in Iowa. New Hampshire's kind of fallen apart. And his super PAC isn't even running ads there. Apparently, he hasn't gotten traction on the ground and is struggling really to pick up speed in the Granite states.
Yeah, because New Hampshire is Trump country. I mean, it's a white working class state. It's the one that he very first won in 2016. Far less religious than Iowa Catholics and evangelicals who vote in that primary. And Yeah, look, what doesn't take a genius to look at the overall demographics and of the base that votes in there and say that the DeSantis case in New Hampshire actually relied a hell of a lot more on Iowa than it did rely on anything else. He needs to win Iowa. If he doesn't, I think he's done.
Yeah,
absolutely done.
I kind of think he's done already.
All right,
But
yeah, it's possible. I mean, you
never
write
know
him
what's
off
going to
till-
happen. All right. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.